And apologies for the all the words on the side. It's not a great slide, but it's a very busy slide, but it does provide some sort of real world context. So how would we use DevSecOps as an example? How would we use DevSecOps in Azure? So again, we've got a fairly standard DevOps implementation, Azure DevOps implementation going on here. Developer using GitHub as a code repository, using pipelines to then to build that code and push that code out to various environments, and then monitoring whatever else once it's deployed with Azure Monitor, and then completing that feedback loop into Azure board so you can capture your the task and whatever else for your developers for the next code release. So from that perspective, it's a fairly standard DevOps implementation. It hasn't got a whole raft of tools in there. With most DevOps pipelines, you can build in existing tool sets and whatever else to help your processes. But there's a number of security features and layers that run through this. And how am I doing for time? Okay, not too bad. Okay, so I'm just going to run down the list so you can see. So starting from the left hand side there, you've got Azure AD with MFA. So straight away you're verifying that users are who they say they are, and you're locking down assets. You're using Azure AD as your identity provider effectively. So developers then commit to GitHub, and bugs are tracked with Azure board. So fairly standard from a DevOps process. GitHub has some automatic security features, so security and dependency scanning that can be used, and it's built into GitHub repository, effectively providing some of that the SAST static security testing that's needed on code. You then get a pull request via the pipeline for CI builds, and then an automated testing then occurs. So from a functional perspective, which then generates a Docker image that is stored in Azure Containers Registry. Upon uploading, then you've got Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which will scan the image for Azure native vulnerabilities and for security recommendations for the pushed image. So again, before before your code's even pushed out into Azure, it's being scanned, it's being checked, it's being verified. Then you have a release. So again, using Azure pipelines as the controlling piece, it integrates with Terraform. Other tools are available, but integrates with Terraform to provision those resources. In this case, into Azure Kubernetes service. Again, all done through secure connections, making sure that everything's encrypted end to end. At this point, you can then make use of Azure policy, which applies, enforces some security guidance and some compliance pieces. So you can validate that the code that you've pushed and the way it's been built has been done in the correct way according to your security standards. Throughout this, it makes use of Key Vault, so Azure Key Vault. So it's used to securely inject secrets and credentials into an application at runtime. So again, it gets away from that hard coding of sensitive information within source code, within configuration files and that type of thing. End users. So once it's deployed within the Azure Kubernetes service, so effectively as a container, but it's up and running, you then have security around your end users. So again, zero trust. You authenticate those users with Azure AD, again requiring things like MFA, and they can also be routed through. A track can also be routed through an application gateway. So again, you're validating and confirming that what the users are trying to do is acceptable. An application gateway provides stops things like SQL injection and whatever else. All the time, through all of this, and while your application is then running, you've got continuous monitoring with Azure Monitor, feeding data. So that's looking both at operational data, but also at security data as well. And you can feed that security data through into Defender for Cloud. You can feed it through potentially into things like Sentinel as well, if you're if you're after some form of sort of SOC type service for analysis and ingestion. So to ingest those security logs and can then alert on, pass it to the various tools and then alert on suspicious activity as well. And then as final part of the DevOps flow, Microsoft Defender for Cloud will do active threat monitoring on the Kubernetes service, on the any sort of VMs you've got running, and VM threats, internals, and anything else. Taking those logs and processing them as well from Azure Monitor. So it just gives you a bit more of a real world example around how you can start to bake security into your DevOps processes. So this is so focused on the tools, but there's training, people training, process, potentially people processes as well that you need to adopt to go around that.